folks, here is a lesson on graphing quadratic functions. Okay, so here is this purple pinkish highlight is your quadratic equation, and here's your A, B's, and C's. Make sense? Okay. Now, step one, we're trying to figure out if it's a smiley or frowny, aka if it opens up or opens down. Okay? All you need to pay attention to is the A and figure out if it's positive or negative. In this case, it's what? Positive, so it opens up, aka smiley. Okay? Step two, your y-intercepts. Anytime you want to find the y-intercepts or any intercept, set the opposite letter equal to what? 0. So in this case, you're going to set x's equal to 0, okay? And here's your original equation. Plug in 0 for x. You can do it in your head. You end up with what, folks? -6, okay? -6. The orange highlight should have actually been here. Okay, so your y-intercept is 0, -6. Now, step 3, we want to find the x-intercepts. Okay, we want to find the x-intercepts. You can factor, okay, but the most sure-shot way of doing it, even though it can be tedious, is the quadratic formula. So your quadratic formula is all the way on the left. Plug in your A's, B's, and C's into your A's, B's, and C's. You get this. This becomes a 169, which becomes a clean what in this case? 13. 5 plus 13 gives you the 18. 5 minus 13 gives you the -8. Okay? And you get, after reducing, 3 over 2 or -2 over 3 for your x-intercepts. Okay? Now, lastly, we want to find the tip, aka the vertex. So if you have a smiley, the tip is right here. Frowny, tip is there. Okay? So the tip is called the vertex, like I said. Okay? Your tip is called the vertex. All right? Now, the x-coordinate of the vertex is really the only new part. The x-coordinate is always going to be -b over 2a, like this. And then you plug it in. B in this case is -5, A is 6. That's why I plugged in over here. Okay? And I get +5 over 12, positive because of the double negative here. Okay? Now, all you have to do with this 5 over 12 in order to find the y-coordinate is what do you do with this 5 over 12, everyone? Just plug it into the original f of x. So I'm going to plug this 5 over 12 into the original f of x right here in purple. And then that's what I get here. Okay? Original f of x, plug in 5 over 12. Okay? Just use your calculator here. And in order to put the square in, just do the caret. Like that. Okay? Just do the caret. And you end up getting 7.04 negative right here, and then your original 5 over 12 for the x-coordinate, and as a decimal, this is your vertex, aka your tip. Okay? So let's recap, folks. With these 4 clues, we're going to graph the quadratic function. Okay, we're going to graph the quadratic function. Okay, so your first step is to figure out if it opens up or down, aka smiley or frowny. In this case, because A is positive, it opens up, aka smiley. Step 2, figure out the y-intercept. For your y-intercept, set x equal to 0. Again, whatever intercept you're trying to find, set the opposite letter equal to 0. Okay, so we plug in 0 in for x's here. We get this -6. So this is the one that should have been highlighted in orange. So y-intercept is 0, -6. X-intercepts, quadratic formula, your A's, B's, and C's, plug it in. We get 169, which ends up being a clean 13, which gives us these 2 fractions. After reducing, we get this. Vertex, aka the tip, okay, to find the x-coordinate is negative b over 2a, which is here. Plug in b and a from the original f of x, and here are your coefficients. You plug it in there. 5 over 12 is your x-coordinate. Then you plug that into your original f of x in for the x's, and it spits out negative 7.04 for the y-coordinate. And your y-coordinate. Okay? So this is your y-coordinate. Okay? And your x-coordinate is 5 over 12 from here, and that as a decimal is 0.42. Folks, now that we set up the 4 clues, okay, we did the 4 steps, we're going to go ahead and graph right now. Okay? We're going to go ahead and graph right now. So here we go. Pen, I'm going to create it using the pen. So we know it's going to create this graph using the pen. So we know it's going to be a smiley based on step 1. Okay. 0, comma, negative 6 is right over here. Okay. X-intercepts of 3 over 2, that's 1.5. That's right here. Okay. Negative 2 over 3 is negative 0.67. That is roughly right over here. Okay. And then we have the vertex, which is the tip, at 0.42 and negative 7.04. That lands us, here's 0.42 roughly here, and negative 7.04 is roughly down here. So those are our 4 points, and it's a smiley. So I'm going to see, let's see how steady my hand is in drawing this. Here's a smiley here. This is a really crooked smile, but you know what I mean. Okay, I'm trying to draw with the mouse. Now, so that's how your graph looks like. That's an approximation. Okay. Now keep in mind, if this were a negative 169, and that would produce an I. Okay, that would produce an I, which means there would not be any x-intercepts here. Okay, I means imaginary, which means there are once an I is produced over here, the whole quadratic formula falls apart, and therefore there is no x-intercepts. Okay, let's say so then the whole graph would look different. Okay, let's see. The whole graph would look different in that case. Now let's say that you have this. Let's say this makes a 0. Okay, if that's a 0, that means that the whole top just becomes 5, which means there will only be one x-intercept. Okay, there will only be one x-intercept. So, you know, in this case, these two would disappear, and you will get one at 5 over 12, which is roughly I'm going to guess like 0.4 or something. It'll be right here. Now, obviously, if these changes were made where this is 0, okay, or the previous scenario when this was a negative 169, these points would be different too. Okay, those points would be different too, because you would have different A, B's, and C's that would create the scenario having I, which is negative 169, or again, different A, B's, and C's that create a 0. Okay, so the whole equation and thus graph would probably change, meaning these would also change too, in addition to the first scenario of not having any x-intercepts due to a negative 169, creating an I situation, an imaginary situation, or scenario number 2, where you have the A's, B's, and C's producing a 0 in the root, which would make one x-intercept. Okay? All right, folks, thanks for tuning in.
I always want to end with this reminder. If you don't get math or any subject, keep searching for that right teacher. Keep searching for that right method. Remember, we live in an age of nearly endless learning resources, especially online. You don't have to assume math is not for you. And on that note, I wish you persistence and perseverance on your journey to learning anything.